and rallies before we finish with some studying of two manifestos. First of all, the one by Norwegian Anders Behring Breivik, this one called the European Declaration of Independence 2083. You can already see the Templar influence in the logo and the title De Laude Novae Militiae, because there was a sort of a break in remembering the Templars after his attack on the 22nd July 2011 in Norway. And finally, we're going to look at the manifesto of the Christchurch mosque shooter, because in many ways he was a copycat of Breivik. So what I'm going to do here, theoretically, is that I'll approach the Knights Templar as a site of memory, to use the term coined by French historian Pierre Nora. And without going into too much detail, Pierre Nora stated that when you look at a site of memory, you're not as interested in what actually happened, but how it is deliberately used or appropriated afterwards. Nora divides the past into history, or in French, histoire, and memory or memoir, where history is what actually happened and memory, that's the things we choose to remember from it. We're also going to look at the Templar in literature and popular culture and the roles they play as an invented tradition, to use the Eric Hobsbawm term, because the fixed expected roles in fiction and popular culture, well, following that and joining in on it is a way of showing that you are part of a community. And this, the Templars having specific roles in fiction, is nothing new, as Professor Helen Nicholson showed in her book Love, War, and the Grail, about medieval portrayals of the Templars. Now, when we look at the Templars in modern popular culture, they are everywhere. And I'm not just talking about a certain novel about a certain code, which we will never mention again in this. We see them in literature, such as the Swedish Crusades trilogy. We see them in movies, such as Kingdom of Heaven, in TV shows, such as Nightfall. We meet the Templars in heavy metal and in the gaming universe, such as games such as StarCraft, Assassin's Creed, the Warhammer 40,000 universe, and so on. The Templars are by now so ubiquitous. They're so much everywhere that you can find throwaway references to them in TV series such as Bones and Doctor Who. It's simply just expected that everybody knows what a Templar is, or possibly just has an idea of them. The Templars, I could keep talking about them as their roles in popular culture, but mostly the roles they play fall into two categories. One is the secret society. The Templars can be a sort of esoteric jack of all trades, for good or ill, and they can play the part of the ultimate Christian knight, for good or ill, once again. In this way, the Templars have become a frame of reference, and they have moved from fiction into the comment sections and online for certain groups. So let's take a look at Templar or Deus Vult memes in the next bit here. Before I give you some examples, I'd just like to add some comments on using memes as sources, because there are two elements that are really, really difficult to ascertain. One, how serious are the people who create these memes? And second of all, are we looking at a Crusader or a Templar? Because it's difficult to figure out. Sometimes the word Templar itself is used. Sometimes we just have to expect that somebody with a white mantle and a red cross is a direct reference to the Templars, even though this is incorrect. The red cross on a white background, if we look at shields and banners. Real Templar shields and banners didn't look like that. When we look at the memes, it's difficult to figure out whether something is trolling, just trying to get a reaction out of people, shit posting, where you flood everything with so much information that people don't know which parts are real and which parts are just made up and for fun, or are they truly genuine? And I'll show that to you by showing you three different examples here. Now, the first one is, I suppose, for a laugh, because it is so ridiculous and makes so little sense that this is clearly, I suppose, an attempt at humor. The second one is a bit more up for interpretation. And in order to understand it, you must first see that it's based on this, the poster for the Swedish movie Armour, the Knight Templar from 2007. The next thing I'm going to show you here was uploaded on the 18th of January 2018, where we see Donald Trump as a Knight Templar. Now, with the words beneath, "there will be hell to pay," a pun playing on Donald Trump's infamous hair, it's hard to figure out what we're supposed to mean. But or what the sender meant when he uploaded this. I looked at the sender's other memes, and they all are fairly right-wing. So this is puzzling and up for interpretation. And the final one, once again, Donald Trump as a Knight Templar, is actually meant to be praise and can be found on a website called Patriot Mania, which is full of US patriotic memes. But political use of the Templars was not confined to obscure online sites. They spilled over into real life. And I have one more meme for you before we move on. And this case, hero of our times, the Old Knight rises. Once again, a play on words, Old Knight, Old Right. You see this Templar-like Deus Vult kind of figure putting his hand on the shoulder of somebody who is dressed in what looks like a typical Proud Boy uniform, sort of pushing him on, showing that the legacy from the past remains. But apart from this one, Templar elements have popped up in real-life protests in the US. This one, from mid to late 2017, from Front Royal, Virginia, we see a Templar-like banner in the middle of a pro-Trump, anti-Hillary Clinton protest. In this picture from the United Right rally, the infamous one in Charlottesville, Virginia, in August 2017, we see sort of Templar-like shield right next to other far-right symbols, such as the Black Sun or the Sonnenrad, and the symbol on the far right, no pun intended, of Vanguard America. And finally, we have even seen full dress-up in Templar garb at an open carry rally at Kent State University, of all places, in September 2018. And of course, when we talk about protests and riots and the far right in the US, there is no way we can avoid mentioning the storming of the Capitol on the 6th of January this year, where, as you can see on the left, there was a Deus Vult banner in the middle of everything, and Templar-like banners in the picture on the right as well. The Templars are amongst us, alive and well, in protest on the far right. But as mentioned earlier, these protests were not the beginning of fascination with the Templars among the far right. All of these are probably inspired to some degree by Anders Behring Breivik, the Norwegian, whose manifesto is my next point. Now, before his terrorist attacks in and around Oslo in 2011, Breivik uploaded his manifesto online, and his manifesto and his attacks seem to have had a sort of a snowball effect on usage of the Templars on the far right. Most of his manifesto is one long rant against immigration, against Islam, against what he calls cultural Marxism, against feminism, etc. However, throughout the manifesto, there are also a number of historical heroes used for inspiration, and one of these especially is the Templars. At one point, he even quotes a translation of Bernard of Clairvaux from 1135, where it says, "A Templar knight is truly a fearless knight and secure on every side, for his soul is protected by the armor of faith, just as his body is protected by the armor of steel. He is thus doubly armed and yet need fear neither demons nor men." At a different point, Breivik claims that there were 9 founding members of his new knighthood, just like the historical Templars were founded by 9 knights. He also claims that he doesn't know how many Knights Templar there are in his organization, maybe between 15 and 80, and unknown how many civilian members, and maybe they're already carrying out attacks. Nobody knows. We have found no proof. Nobody has found any proof that there were more than just him in this organization. It was something he just made up, used the memory of the Knights Templar as a secret society to make it seem scarier that they had infiltrated everything. In other parts of the manifesto, Breivik sets out rules and regulations, but he also boasts of his sexual conquest and his fine designer's clothing, both completely at odds with the historical rule of the Templars. Part of this, especially the ceremonies, might seem laughable, and it looks like a boys-only secret club if we didn't know the attacks that would happen later on. And if we want to know how important the Templars were to Breivik, just look at his final entry right here, where he says, "I believe this will be my last entry. It is now Friday, July the 22nd, 1251. Sincere regards, Andrew Berwick," his inventive pseudonym, "Justiciar Knight Commander, Knights Templar Europe, Knights Templar Norway." The first bomb exploded at 15:25, 2.5 hours after he wrote this. A copycat of Anders Breivik was the Christchurch mosque shooter who attacked 2 mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand on the 15th of March 2019. He also uploaded his manifesto just before his attack, this manifesto called The Great Replacement. A part of this manifesto is set out as a Q&A. So, for instance, asking, did the groups you support or are aligned with order or promote your attack? No, no group ordered my attack. I make the decision myself. Though I did contact the reborn Knights Templar for a blessing in support of the attack, which was given, and afterwards stating, but I have only had brief contact with Knight Justitia Breivik, receiving a blessing for my mission after contacting his brother Knights. Once again, no proof that this actually took place, and parts of this manifesto are just shitposting, throwing a lot of stuff out there, trying and making it very difficult for the receiver to figure out which parts are serious and which are just trolling. Similar to Breivik, the Christchurch mosque shooter mentions a large number of historical heroes and even marks some of them on one of his rifles, as you can see right here. There are references to the battles of Tours, to John Hunyadi, the leader of the Christian part in the Siege of Belgrade. You see far-right elements such as the 14 words. And unlike Breivik, the Christchurch mosque shooter refers to the Hospitallers. You can see right close to the trigger, Jean Parisot Lavalette. And although you can't see it in this picture, at some place on the barrel, it does say the Siege of Malta 1565. Another organization that I just briefly mentioned is somebody called the Knights Templar Order International. And on their website, they claim that they are against all kinds of political hatred, no matter from what end of the political spectrum, which sounds very nice. And then you look a bit further, it says, the order desires to welcome into membership people who are natural leaders, who share an understanding of the threats we face today globally from all forms of extremism, radical Islam, liberalism, political corruption, cultural Marxism, and anti-Christian bigotry. Right, so once again, fairly slanted towards the far right. So as I try to get towards the conclusions here to keep the time and ask why the Knights Templar of all things, what we see right here, the memory of the Knights Templar today, is partially shaped by a popular culture, and it demonstrates a confused historical consciousness. The Templars were already present in popular culture, so it's very, very easy to appropriate them. And because quite little is known about the historical Templars, well, you can just pretty much fill in the gaps in every way you want. On the far right, and over the past decade, we have seen the two literary traditions, the secret society and the ultimate Christian knight, merge into one scary, shady figure. The Templars have become popular among white supremacists who are attracted to what these two roles represent. The Templars represent strength, both physical and secretive. They represent conviction, sense of purpose, and a common element, a prevailing idea I see in these memes and manifesto is a disdain for weak men, a lust for power, and a belief in conspiracy theories such as QAnon and white genocide and so on. And that leaves us with a question for us as historians. What do we do about all of this? What is our role in shaping historical narratives? Do we have a right, an obligation, a duty, a privilege? Is it our place to take part in shaping the historical narrative, or should we stay out of it? Should we be like Professor Kevin M. Cruz from Princeton, who almost has 500,000 followers on Twitter? Or is that not our arena? Bring some nuance to the debate. I do not have the definitive answer, but I hope that this can be a fruitful discussion after our 3 papers right here. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Brian. That was a very good paper, as always. And now, well, with you.
Okay, so we are quickly moving on from Scandinavia, the US, and New Zealand to Southern Europe. Our next speaker is Vinicius Dreger, who holds a PhD from the University of Sao Paulo and is a professor of medieval history at the State University of Montes Claros. According to photos I have seen, he is a true medieval historian because apparently he has brought a sword to class earlier. But today he is armed with words about political neo-medievalism in Italy. In the paper, today Barbarossa is not a person, but it is a state. And the new Alberto de Giussano is me. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Luis. Indeed, I have brought the sword to class. Well, to talk about Charlemagne. Well, my presentation. Right. William Shakespeare, in Romeo and Juliet's prologue, establishes the set of the play. Two households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona, where we lay our scene. From ancient grudge break to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. Someone could ask, what is the real cause of the vendetta between Montecchius and Capuletus? Probably the dispute between Guelphs and Ghibellines, traditionally the supporters of papal and imperial parties, a division that plagued cities and families in Italy from the 12th to the 15th centuries. In this context, we can see the rise and fall of the Lombard League, a compact that united a great number of northern Italian cities against the Stauffen emperors, Frederick I and Frederick II. The apotheosis of the League's achievements was undoubtedly its victory against Frederick Barbarossa in the Battle of Legnano in 1176. And the League, the battle, and all the symbols associated to them were resignified by a myriad authors and artists as part of the Risorgimento, the 19th century's Italian nationalist movement. For them, Legnano was a point of unity against foreign occupants of Italian soil. To make more of a modest battle, they incorporated into history some legendary elements, as the Knights of the Death's Company and their leader, Alberto da Giussano. In 1900, was inaugurated in the city of Legnano a monument commemorating the victory against Barbarossa. The anonymous Legnanos warrior. This monument informally became to be considered as a tribute to the apocryphal Alberto da Giussano. The bronze warrior, 2 meters and 40 centimeters tall, wields a sword and a shield, rejoicing over the victory won against the Imperials. However, the politics of the Lega Nord in the second half of the 20th century would come to take over the symbols of the Lombard League, the Battle of Legnano, and the monument itself, and resignify them from the final decades of the century to the present. The Lega Nord today, only La Lega, was born as an ethno-regionalist and federalist political movement. And during its history, it was separatist, anti-state, Eurosceptic, being nowadays the main xenophobical party in Italy. Essentially, the epitome of the postmodern and highly mediatic alt-right party of contemporary times. In 1996, the Leghisti initiated their separatist phase, questing for the establishment of their new nation, La Padania, to be constituted by the northern and wealthiest part of Italy. In their alternatively telling of Italian history, La Lega supporters demanded for Padania a retrospective of regional autonomy and solid identity, homogeneous traits that organize their heterogeneity. Therefore, in their mythopoietic effort, they sought those traits in different historical moments. Among the Cisalpine Celts, who would have resisted the Romans, being conquered, but not assimilated. Among the Longobards, who resisted the Eastern Romans and the Franks, again, conquered but not assimilated. And finally, between the high medieval communes, which resisted the new Romans of the medieval ruling Roman Empire under Frederick Barbarossa. Thus, Padania would continue to resist the centralizing dominance of the contemporary government of Rome, at least in the operation of historical resignification intended by the La Lega. As fascinating these reinterpretations of the Celts and the Longobards may be, we'll focus our analysis on their resignification of both the Lombard League and the Battle of Legnano, central to the mythology of La Lega. When, in 1984, Umberto Bossi created Lega Lombarda, he embraced all the symbols from destruction of Milan to the Peace of Constance in 1183 that illustrated the great achievements of the North Italian communes opposing the centralism of Frederick Barbarossa. These are essentially ancient symbols of the Guelphs, the nickname given to the movement, the carroccio, a term that designated the cart that carried a mobile altar and the flags of the communes in battle, including Legnano. Alberto da Giussano, the false hero of the battle, and the Oath of Pontida of 1167, which would be none other than the founding act of this alliance of cities against the Holy Roman Empire. Pontida's oath is an episode of questionable historicity, having been recorded for the first time only in Bernardino Corio's Historia di Milano from 1503. Legend says that on April 4th, 1167, emissaries from Lombard cities met secretly in the Benedictine Abbey of Pontida and vowed to remain together until Frederick Barbarossa was defeated and Milan rebuilt. Thus, under the blessing of Pope Alexander III, the First Lombard League was born, which made the Risorgimento make Pontida one of the places of memory of the Italian nation. In May 12th of 1190, Umberto Bossi decided to revive the forgotten symbol. He summoned the newly elected municipal, provincial, and regional councillors from the Lega Lombarda to Pontida. We are tired today, as we were 8 centuries ago, tired of being a land of invasions, first by the Mezzogiorno and now by the Third World. He invites them to take an oath, with their fists clenched in their chests. The newly elected Lega supporters repeat after them, I swear loyalty to the cause of the autonomy and freedom of our people. Today, which today, as it was 1,000 years ago, is embodied by the Lega Lombarda and its democratically elected leaders. Umberto Bossi evokes the march of the Lombard armies against centralism and connects this new commitment to what had been done in the Middle Ages. Today, in Pontida, the years of struggle for the freedom of our people links us to the sacrifices of our ancestors who choose this place to swear to defend freedom. Well, in the statute of the Lega Nord per Indipendenza della Padania, in its 2012 edition, establishes in Article 3 specifically about the Liga's symbol, the following. The symbol consists of a circle involving the figure of Alberto da Giussano as represented in the Legnano monument. On its shield, the figure of the Lion of San Marco is drawn, all outlined at the top with the couplet Lega Nord. We must remember that if on one hand the Lega propagates what historians can characterize as a bad history, it does not do it in a naive way, insisting that its constructions have verisimilitude, confusing correct information with misleading contexts, dubious words, and misinterpretations, making it difficult for the average voter to critically analyze their arguments, since they are often badly informed about these past events, much talked about jingoistically, but little discussed critically in resources they can assess and understand. Returning to Alberto da Giussano, we can clearly observe the impact of this figure on the composition of the logo when facing it. It's specifically the symbol of the regional directory of the Lega in Legnano, belonging to the national section of Lombardy. It could be, it will be, oh, I lost a little. Well, oh yes. And the warrior of Legnano surges again in the Lega Giovanni, the youth movement of the Lega Nord, in his logo, in its logo, which is a little different and much about more neo-medievalistic in his approach, in its approach. No? The use of an aesthetic very close to comic books, particularly the classic comics of Hal Foster's Prince Valiant, but remembering that Italian fumetti forms one of the great traditions of the industry, games of medieval inspiration, it imbues this image with a subtext of adventure and heroism. The detail of the crumpled, jagged shield with an enemy axe found there gives a meaning of previous epic fights and more to come. Taught to reach younger demographic groups to renew the party cadres. Well, we have here an approach essentially neo-medievalistic to problems of the contemporaneity, to contemporary problems. And, oh, yes. Stop sharing, okay. And it's really interesting to consider that a political party, right-wing, it's making, constructing all their visual identity with elements from the Middle Ages, reinterpreted, but not from the Middle Ages itself, from the interpretations nationalistic of the 19th century, with a completely different objective. 19th century Risorgimento was about to make the unification of Italy. And the Lega, between 96 and 2012, it's about splitting that union to make Padania a new nation. They interpreted all the signs with an opposite conclusion. Oh, right. The historic Lombard League was an alliance of free northern Italian communes that never intended to become a stable federation or a political union. Instead, the alliance aimed to defend some prerogatives of the communes against the demands of the emperor. The modern Lega accuses this ruler of trying to impose a foreign yoke on the free cities of the north. However, it is quite debatable where this was indeed his intention. On the contrary, the emperor was looking for a more modest goal, the formal recognition of his authority. On the other hand, the Italian communes did not deny that the monarch was their legitimate supreme temporal authority. Romantic nationalism in the 19th century took a remarkable battle with limited consequences and transformed it in an epic struggle for the union and independence of a nation that did not exist in the past, but that was born at that moment. Their mystifications came to supply those of the Liga, which gave them a new meaning and propagated them through mass media and providing them a status of unprecedented popularity, what culminated in the production of a propaganda piece in the form of the feature film Barbarossa, or Sword of War, using as much as possible of their version from the medieval events. Umberto Bossi's phrase, "Today Barbarossa is not a person, but it is a state, and the new Alberto da Giussano is me," is a remarkable reminder of his and Lega's neo-medievalist ambitions to set an alternate history of northern Italy, and establishes a benchmark neo-medievalist approach for similar movements. In a moment like the present, in which the arena of debates in public sphere is internationally charged with hatred and contempt for scientific knowledge in all its instances, the historian's positioning is required not only to deny the myriad of fake news, alternative truths, and outright lies that are daily broadcasted by the media and social networks, but also to act in an assertive way, dismantling the malicious strategies of uses of the past for societies more and more accustomed to the consumption of media-inspired representations of the past as if they were history. at the same time that they are immersed in an inconsequential relativism. Thereby, the historian must enter the field of public debates to unravel the plots of the present instrumentalizations of the past and weaponizing it in this war for the hearts and minds of societies worldwide through the popularization of their arguments. As Daniel Wallenberg well noted, the popular is political. If grossly simplified historical analogues are not hindered and challenged, we potentially give critical political space to extremist elements. Considering it, such a conclusion is valid for understanding problems originated from revisionist movements that began to emerge in the 80s, as did Leganord, the object of our analysis. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Okay.
Yes, we just about made time. So thank you, Venetias, for a very, very interesting paper, and once again stressing that there's so much that is popularly seen as true history, but is really just a nationalist interpretation from the 19th century. Great. We are going full circle back to Brazil, finally here, as Luis is going to give us the last paper of this panel. Luis graduated in history from the Federal University of Minas Gerais and is a master's candidate at the same institution. Now, he is too modest to say so himself, so I should just add that he has a special knack for finding, analyzing, and exposing online content, which we're going to see now in the paper, The Templar Battalion, Rio's Military Police Shock Troopers, and their Medieval Mise en Scène. So, Luis, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Let me just share my slides. What?
Can't see it just yet.
Yeah, because it's okay. There it is. It should work now. Can you see it?
Yes, I can. Perfect.
Okay, let me put it full screen. Due to time constraints, I'm going to skip most of the theoretical discussions of this paper, but I'll be happy to indulge them in the comments if we have time. So we're going to be talking about the Templar Battalion. And, well, what is a Templar Battalion? We're going to have some explaining to do, but just take a look at this picture first and let it sink. And I'm going to try to focus on images on this presentation. So I think the first, let me just remove, okay. So the first thing I've noticed is how conservatives and the right wing in general have appropriated the Templar image, which Brian has already marvelously explored here, so I won't delve too deep in this, but suffice to say, it isn't new to see Bolsonaro as a Templar or Donald Trump as a Templar. The Templar is often the go-to pick for the right wing to represent themselves, but not only for the right wing. I mean, it is used to represent the right wing, but not only by the right wing. It has also become a commonplace for the left wing, at least here in Brazil and in the United States to some extent, to call those people medieval or even Templars. So we can see here what I would call a retrofitting effect, in which the more the right tries to present themselves as Templar, the more the left will try to present themselves as Templar. Will try to claim the right wing are Templars. Important to notice here, Templar here is not understood as the Templar order, the historical thing. Templar has become a construct, an avatar of order and conservatism. And it's often, if not always, synonym with Crusader. So as Brian mentioned, it's not that historical Templars would wear that garment, but it has become this symbol. And here we have some examples of these neo-Templar organizations here in Brazil, which is a group called Templários da Pátria, which is somewhat of a backwaters Proud Boys, let's call it. But, well, Templars and Brazil, what is the correlation? And what are we looking at here? Well, that goes back a long way, which I don't have time to explore. But summarizing, the Templar Order has a peculiar history in Portugal with the creation of the Order of Jesus Christ in 1319, which is somewhat of a continuation of the original Templar order, and that has by itself its relations with Portugal monarchy and Brazilian colonization. This has become a big trope amongst present-day nobility in Brazil and integralist movements. Now, integralist is a type of integralism which is originated from Portugal and later on from Brazil, which is a neo-fascist, extremely Catholic philosophy. And what I mean by nobility, Brazil has no official nobility, of course, but we had so until the end of the Second Brazilian Empire in the late 19th century. So we still have families who claim to have titles of nobility, even though they have no official value. And this brings an interesting debate, which is often reignited on the undergrounds of the internet, about who would be the heir to the throne. Anyways, here I have a quick meme from a monarchist page, which claims to present the Templar origins of the state of São Paulo. And it's taking the Templar cross and then saying that, oh, from the Templar cross, we have the cross from the Order of Christ, to which we have this original flag of the state of São Paulo. A huge jump, if you ask me, but we'll see worse. We also have the so-called claimants to the throne, and this is one of the examples, which is Prince Alexandre da Silva Camelo Rurikovich Carvalho and many other names, who has a claim to the Brazilian throne and to the throne of Russia, if such a thing even exists. He, of course, presents himself as a Templar monarch. Another example is the sovereign and serene Luso-Brazilian Royal and Imperial Templar House of Avis, Lisbon, and its secret king, which, again, is a very complicated affair, but suffice to say, this is a Brazilian and Portuguese movement who claims the throne of both Portugal and Brazil, and they claim to be a Templar monarchy. Now, the origins of the idea of a Templar monarchy goes back to a king of Portugal who was a Templar and had to forgot the word here, but to relieve himself from the order in order to marry and bear children. Now, again, we have today at least 3 different Templar orders in Brazil, official Templar orders. They give certificates of nobility, they have membership, meetings, titles like knights and dames, and I would have joined one to see what they do, but they require somewhat of a hefty investment in cash. But I chose some pictures of them here. You can see that, again, the Templar word is very loosely applied, and you can spot Freemasonry symbols and many other secret society symbols, which again meshes very well with what Brian said about the Templars' dual role as both the warriors and avatars of force, and as well as this very secret and obscure society. Focus on these swords. We're gonna talk about them very quickly. Talking about the military police in Brazil. So when I'm talking about military police, I'm not talking about the police of the army, as it is in the case of the United States. The military police is the main police force in Brazil, although they are not the only one. We have a civilian police as well. But just in general terms, they do use military ranks, and they are very well equipped in some states. And every division of the police has a shock battalion. And also they give swords in their graduations. Notice the swords. Now, this is the shock battalion. And you can see they are usually the most well-trained and equipped special ops forces within the forces. So the Templar Battalion of Rio. We have something which is called the self-entitled Templar Battalion, which is a group within the shock troopers of the state of Rio de Janeiro, connected to this Castelo Operações de Choque. What is this? Well, this is a preparatory course for shock troopers. So it's a shock trooper academy, let's call it. I can't specify when this was created yet. I'm trying to find out, but my best guess would be 2012, with at least this current denomination. Anyways, those guys are famous for their medieval pastiche, let's say. These are some images from their Facebook page, and you can see a shock trooper dressed in riot armor doing some iconic medieval knight poses. Now notice the sword. It is the exact, not exact the same, but it's a very similar sword to that one. It's actually a slightly different model, but we'll see a bit more on that later. Notice the sword. This is not a police sword, a standard police sword, but these swords, they are awarded to the officers who conclude this course. Now, this Templar battalion also has this passion for their so-called medieval roots. And this is from their central unit. You can see this sort of display with a sword and a quote-unquote medieval armor, side by side with a modern armor, both holding the shield in a similar position. Again, they're trying to establish a direct parallel here. And here, some pictures from their Facebook. I think this is one of the most interesting ones because it draws a direct line from the Roman legionnaire to the Templar knight to the shock trooper of today here in Brazil. And they are all depicted holding a shield and a melee weapon on the other hand, a sword and a, well, stick in the case of the police. I forgot the word for that in English. And then final interesting thing, they also call their armored transport vehicles the Paladins. Paladin 1, Paladin 2, Paladin 3, and there it goes. And here we have a mural, which is, I would assume, within one of their precincts. And it is written on top of the mural, the Templar battalion. And so we have some officers posing for a picture, holding their swords in front of this Templar battalion, in which we have a depicted Knight Templar in a very similar position to them. So, drawing to my conclusions here, first question to be asked when we see something like that, other than what the hell am I looking at and why, I think is the question of, is there a precedent? I mean, is there a tradition, a real tradition of Templars within the Brazilian armed forces, for example? Maybe this is a very 19th century, 18th century tradition of representations and they're just following it. Well, not quite. Oh yeah, I forgot this picture, which is also from their official Facebook page. And I guess this guy doesn't know if he's a Templar or a Teutonic Knight. Anyways, here we have the symbol of the Special Ops in the state of Rio. Now that's the symbol of the Special Ops as a whole, the shock operatives. The other symbol I've shown first is the symbol of this special preparation school, which was the helmet. Now, let's take a look at some other states' shock troopers symbols. We have this one, which we can see a Spartan helmet and a 300 movie sword. And this one, the Spartan helmet. And if you Google Brazilian shock troopers, you're going to see a lot of Spartan helmets. So the first important thing I've noticed here is no, there seems to be no tradition of claiming any Templar connection within the armed forces and the police force here in Brazil, and also in the state of Rio. What do we? What we have, though, is a very alive connection to pop culture. So when the movie 300 made a lot of success, well, those guys incorporated the swords from the movie, which are purely fictitious, in their logo. A thing I've noticed, though, is that the state of Rio does have this Templar bassinet helmet as a symbol of the Templar forces as a whole, which creates this not Templar association, but this knightly association, at least prior to the Templar associations. Now, from what I could find, the Templar associations, they are mostly from after 2012, which is reasonable if we assume this is correlated to the boom of medieval memes and the Templar zeitgeist, I could say. And I think my final note here, and I'm sorry if I'm cutting a bit, but well, that's the time, is that this is a police force. These guys, even though they are an independent unit and they chose this symbol, not the state, they are state representatives. So what we're looking here is political medievalism that is in some way, shape, or form being endorsed by the state. And if not endorsed, it is at least tolerated and seen as something that is so normal that it doesn't raise some eyebrows. And well, I think the final curiosity I wanted to point is the sword. Contrary to police tradition, here in which the swords they are awarded are 19th century style sabers, this sword is a so-called Excalibur, which you can buy on eBay for around $100 with a wall hanger. So yeah, I think I will end on that note. And I'm sorry if that ending doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's what we have for today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for that, Luis. Fascinating to see all the different stuff you managed to dig up in different places, and I think also interesting how easy it is for everybody to appropriate the Templars and the Middle Ages in general. All it takes is $100 to buy a sword or 5 minutes to cook up a meme on Meme Generator or whatever. So thank you to the both of you for some really, really fascinating insight, and we'll now open for questions. Anything you'd like to discuss, just put it in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll see what we can do with it. And I know that as a teacher, I'm not supposed to ask, are there any questions? I'm supposed to ask, which questions do you have? So Andrew Elliott says, thank you to all the speakers for 3 fascinating papers. Thank you. I'm really interested in the confluence visible on all 3 papers of invented tradition, both as invented medieval heritage and invented medievalism. Are these traditions all related inevitably to nationalism? And do we find any of these movements people reflecting on the invented fictitious nature of their medievalism? Highly interesting question. Would any of you like to start with that?
I could, because I think I'm the one who has less to say about that. Starting by the last part of the question, at least in the case of the police force here, I think not much in terms of these movements. If I understand the question correctly, I don't think they are self-aware of the fictitious nature of this medievalism, although they are very aware of the pulp nature of it. I mean, they are aware that they are drawing their Templar reference from movies, for example. But they are not aware to the extent that this is fictitious, I would say. Now, answering the first part, I think the Templar battalion, even though the police force is a very nationalist thing, and if you look at their page on Facebook, you will see a lot of nationalist material. I don't think this is a very nationalist manifestation of political medievalism. I think this is more related to a overarching identity as both conservatives, Christians, and defenders of order, rather than Brazilians themselves. I could be wrong here, but I think they chose this symbol much more because of what it represents, other than any correlation with Brazilian connections. I think when I was talking about those neo-Templar organizations, they do claim Templar heritage. This, for the police force, though, it is more in that line of the Roman legionnaire, the knight, and then the riot trooper. Is more like they're the heirs of this military tradition.
Yeah, we can concur with that. About the history of the military organizations, something like about in the medieval, the 9 proud heroes the nine worthies. The antiquity, pagan antiquity, biblical antiquity, and their past, immediate past in the Middle Ages. Some in that tradition, but we can see some of generic nationalism in the police force. I came from a family of officers in the military police of the state of São Paulo, and in this kind of diffuse nationalism. What other than the reasons that Luis had said, I can add something like about masculinity too. They see themselves as a paragon of masculinity and project this in the past, in the Roman legionary, in the Knight Templar. All of this is complexly mixed up in the imagination of those police forces. But thinking about an Italian case, for example, they know about the construction of the medievalism. However, they choose to ignore it and treat it like a history with capital H. Well, they are making consciously a new telling of history to legitimize their not nationalism, but their new nation. Well, in shock against the nationality, the Italian nationality based on Rome.
Yeah. Thank you to both of you for answering first, so I have a chance to gather my thoughts about all of this, because Andrew, this is an incredibly complicated question, because one thing that I've mentioned a few times, the Swedish Armour or Crusades trilogy is actually really left-wing, and what is stressed there is that the Templars are very international, sort of multicultural element, stresses the Muslim mercenaries that they use, and also how they respect other cultures because they live next to them for so long. So there's also that element to it. Regarding nationalism, I see a lot of it spreading from nationalism to sort of a Huntington-esque clash of civilization instead here, that it's sort of a Western chauvinism in general instead of specific nationalism. And the weirdest bit with the Manifesto of Breivik is that he has actually done a bit of studying. For instance, he knows about Jonathan Ryder-Smith's book, The First Crusaders, and uses it to debunk the myth that the First Crusade was only the unwanted sons that were sent away, because Jonathan Ryder-Smith definitely showed with that book that that was not true. And that leads on to the, hey, do you know that the establishment is lying to you, that it wasn't just the unwanted sons? And you can also see it with 10 things they don't tell you about the Middle Ages. Number 4 will blow your mind. I think partially because the Middle Ages have such a sort of bad reputation in some circles of historians, where the Renaissance, good, Middle Ages, bad, Age of Enlightenment, good, Middle Ages, bad. Then it becomes very easy to convince people with some not even particularly academic points stating that, hey, there's something they don't tell you about the Middle Ages. It was actually a pretty cool period. Men were men and they had more time off. And if you lived back then, you would probably be the Lord of the Manor and you would party harder than what you could do today. So there's a lot of that, yeah, where they appropriate a bit of academic history on top of everything.
Yeah, I would just like to add what I said in the chat, that at least in my personal experience, those internet Templars and those subgroups that we usually dismiss as dumb appropriations of the Middle Ages, most of the times they know more history than we give them credit for. Perhaps bad, outdated history, perhaps, but academic history nonetheless. That's it.
Yes, or at least some thorough trawling of Wikipedia in some cases. But yeah, often they do have a better grasp of things than anything else. And there's also the bit about the Templars. This is a boys only club, so it's only for real men. And I once talked about the Templars and extremism, and somebody asked me, but why the Templars? After all, they failed. They were defeated and they were shut down by the papacy. Why even that? And well, there is some glorification of martyrdom. If you read bits and pieces of Breiviks Manifesto, there's a lot of you should be a martyr and make sure that you have a bit of a tan and you work out and you wear a little bit of makeup, look good when you go out to perform your acts of terrorism and go straight into martyrdom. And in the manifesto of the Christchurch mosque shooter, he finishes with "See you in Valhalla." Wonderful mashup of Viking and Crusader and everything else along the way. But there's also this glorification of martyrdom amongst the really extremely far right in this, and the Templars fit perfectly right there.
Yeah, it does feed a lot on the persecution complex and the conspirational underdog discourse of some of these groups, like, for example, QAnon. So the idea that the Templars were repressed by the establishment,
yes,
which is the mirror opposite of what the liberal version of the Templar myth says, which is the Assassin's Creed one, which is like the Templars are the secret establishment and they are controlling you.
Yes.
It's incredible that the same rhetoric links it with about, for example, Islamist extremists, the bombmen. You have to be fit. You have to be in a state that when you finish your mission, to go to the paradise. And again, it's a paradise for the macho. It's incredibly similar rhetoric.
So let's see if you have any more questions, because our time is short.
Still have 15 minutes to go, so fire away, everybody.
Also reminding people, you can ask your questions verbally. You just say you have a question, and we can give you permission to join in. It's just a security protocol.
Okay, so Amy Kaufman is saying, and to me especially, I appreciate your comment on discerning how serious a meme is or isn't. How would you read its use differently if it's shitposting versus something the poster truly believes in? Do you think there's a difference in its reception online? Another absolutely amazing question, and it especially comes to mind with the Christchurch mosque shooters manifesto, because there is so much shitposting, but there's also something that is really, really genuine in there. And I think there's, especially if you see some of the last messages on 8chan, I believe, just before he leaves to commit his deed, there's this really strange mix, and I think it feeds into that myth of the secret society and having sort of a verbal code that only you understand in everything, that if you're a part of it, you can easier see which parts are shitposting and which parts are genuine. And that also makes them feel, I suppose, more empowered because they have a secret language that we outside don't understand. Okay, then I'm going to turn things around, and I'm going to ask you in the audience, could you please raise your hand if you think that historians should play a bigger part in shaping historical narratives? Just use the raise hand function, if it works. Okay, so at least we do see a couple of people agreeing with us. And I'm going completely teach you right now. So Luis, you have your hand up. How do you think that historians could play a bigger part in shaping historical narratives than what we do right now? How can we engage a general audience and give them some historical facts?
I think for starters, they can watch our table on Friday, I think, which is about public history. But other than this merchandising, and connecting to what Amy said in the chat, I think it's important not to underestimate the subjects and the potential of the subjects, because at least one of the reactions I have a lot is that, oh, these are just memes, this is not important, or these people have no idea of what they're doing, which is usually very wrong. And even if a meme is just a meme for fun, that doesn't mean it has political connotations. So I think other than what everyone already says, like, oh, we should try to make our language more accessible. We should participate in events that are not only for academia, and so on and so on. I think we should start paying attention, because I think sometimes when we look at those things, at QAnon, at the guy dressed as a knight going to protest here in Brazil, we tend to be condescending with those things. We tend to look at them like, oh, it's just a lunatic, or it's, okay, he has no idea, or he's trying to force an artificial, and sometimes no, sometimes there is more. I think it is possible to do what I would call here an intellectual study of these groups in the same way we do intellectual studies about, I don't know, political parties and things like that. I think we could trace down those so-called intellectuals. I think Breivik is one of these intellectuals. He has influenced a generation of other people who are producing more and more content. So yeah, that would be my answer. I think we should start taking these things seriously and not underestimating them and thinking history is only made by old and dusty manuscripts.
Angela just made an absolutely wonderful point in the chat that of course everybody is able to see. But of course I completely agree with you, Angela, that it's our job to add some nuance to everything here, because, well, let's face it, memories shape narratives, narratives create cultures, and cultures influence behavior. So I think that's definitely something to take away from all of this. So wonderful point you just made there. And now there's a question in Portuguese, so I'm going to leave that to the two of you.
Okay, I can translate the question. It's for me. João is asking if the change in the symbols from Spartans to Templars would be related to the rising on Christian conservatism here in Brazil, especially neo-charismatic conservatism, which I think not really. Why is that? First, I may have expressed myself wrong during the presentation because it was so short, but it wasn't really a change. Most of these groups do present, like most of these battalions do use Greek symbols and Greek helmets and Spartan symbols. And I think that does fit most of the times with their Christian ideals anyways, because it is that idea that the Greeks were not really religious. They were not really pagans because their religion is mythology almost. And that's emphasized. And the Greeks are emphasized as is like super macho. And I think the movie 300 is really the responsible for that symbol there, and why most of the battalions are still using that symbol today. Now, the Templar symbol, that's for sure related to the rise in Christian conservatism and also to the rise in medieval memes. But I don't think one thing is supplanting the other. I think they just coexist. And yeah, that's it.
If I can add something.
Okay, just is that
okay?
No, is that someone mentioned from the organization that I think Angela had her hand raised, so maybe Angela has a question, and I'm sorry if you do, Angela. Go on, Venetias.
Well, thinking about what I know about the shock battalions and special ops battalions in police in various states in Brazil, they tend to approach history in a history of war. For example, in São Paulo, all the images in their names, their history, it's about the Paraguayan War. That the public force of São Paulo, the ancestor of military police, was part of. And there, in this, we have the history of the force. In policies a little less charged with history, we have that picked up histories, elements of military history of general kind. Sparta, Rome, Middle Ages. It's kind of really patchy, that identities. However, you have a point with the Templars and in the movie 300. And we can see that with the constitution of many battalions after 2000. And that the pop connection, it's popped up.
I think we have one final question from Rory, and then we should end it, Brian. Okay?
Yes.
Okay.
So Rory asks, as the far right's appropriation of the Templars became significantly more common after 2011, how much of an influence did Breivik's choice to appropriate the Templars have over the far right since? If he had chosen the Teutonic Knights or Spartans or something else, would they be the main target of appropriation instead, or were the Templars always going to be a target? I think that's, of course, absolutely wonderful question. In parts, I don't think the Teutonic Knights would have had the same appeal, partially because they are so specifically Germanic in everything, and also because they didn't have that already highly present role in popular culture. I honestly could see him using the Spartans, and it would have been the same, because the Spartans were also had such a stalwart place in popular culture thanks to 300, and like I just wrote in the chat, also with the come and take them, come and claim them, Molan Labe, whatever motto being spread amongst anti-government groups. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think that I think it could have been the Spartans, although they have the warrior element. They don't have that wonderful connection of secret society and warrior that the Templars have, and that bit with saying, "Ooh, we are amongst you in secret. You don't know how many there are. And we have probably already attacked somewhere, and we're going to defend Christianity, or if not Christianity, then Western culture." And I think that probably means that that the Templars would always be a really, really good target. I was unlucky enough to finish my master's degree in the waning days of 2009, and a year and a half before Breivik, and I just reread my final chapter that stated, it is difficult to tell what the future will bring for the Templars, but I don't think they're going away anytime soon, and they definitely weren't. So I think the Templars were going to be a target because they had such a massive place. And then I think that somebody help me out here, because I don't remember when the game Crusader Kings 2 came out, because that really popularized Deus Vult, because whenever you say support a crusade, a pop-up window says Deus Vult, and it spread from there. But I think it's from 2012 or something along those lines. So it's just a random connection that really, really makes sense with Breivik and the Templars, and then with Crusader Kings alongside everything else.
I would like to mention that some of these far-right appropriation of the Templars, and this whole idea of the Templars as an avatar of order and the establishment even, at least to me, does seem to predate Breivik. I think Breivik was the cherry on top, if we can call a mass murder a cherry, of course. But Assassin's Creed, the first one, is from 2007, I believe. Mm. And it already presents this vision of the Templars as this, okay, they're the villains, but the idea is the same. And we have also a book by Peter something, The Murdered Magicians, that you can Google it. And he talks about this construction of the magician and sorcerer as an ideal of chaos and the Templar as an ideal of order. So, partner, thank you. So yeah, I think Breivik helped make the Templars that, but I think they were already ripe for the taking because they have these special combinations that the Spartans don't.
Yeah, a mix of already with the Da Vinci Code was all the rage in the years leading up to that, and then you have Assassin's Creed
and Da Vinci Code. I forgot.
And after all, the Templars had been the sort of go-to anti-establishment, new age. We have secret society ever since the 1980s. At some point.
Indeed.
So, Vinicius, do you have anything to say?
Well, only to thank all for being such a good audience. Thank you for your presentation and moderation. Thanks também to Brian for his presentation and moderation. Well, we have to go.
Yeah, we have another session right now, which is Lusophone Medievalisms. This is in Portuguese, though, but you're all welcome to join us. And yeah, this will be a great session as well. And tomorrow we have a whole day of sessions, and after tomorrow as well. Hope to see you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for stopping by. Thank you. See you out there very soon.
Bye.
Bye.